Hey guys, John V here from PhoneArena. Right now you're watching our video comparison between the Moto X and the Apple iPhone 5, two flagship devices. You know they're going to contend against one another. The Moto X is starting its voyage right now to see where it's going to go. And we know with the iPhone 5, it's been well established for some time now, so it's only fitting to compare these two right now. Not surprisingly, it's the iPhone 5 that again has the premium element with its design that's attributed to its brushed aluminum casing, which gives it that very sturdy construction over its rival. In contrast, the Moto X really stands out for its curved rear casing, which gives it the more natural and comfortable feel in the hand. At the same time, too, it's just amazing that the size difference isn't that much, especially when you take into consideration that the Moto X is packing a significantly larger screen than its rival. Mainly due to their close pixel density figures, you're not going to notice a difference in terms of which display is the sharper one between the two. They're both crisp, offer a lot of detail, and especially in the web browser and the zoomed out view, you're hardly going to notice the difference of which one's going to be the superior one over the other. The biggest differentiator here with the displays is just the bezel around the left and right edges of both handsets. The Moto X does a little bit better job in actually trimming that, so it still makes it a very form-fitting handset when you hold it in the hand. As far as the other qualities, it's a 4.7-inch AMOLED 720p display on the Moto X, and you have a smaller 4-inch Retina display with a resolution of 1136 by 640 pixels on the iPhone 5. So as I said, the detail's not going to notice that much. They use different display technologies. With the AMOLED panel of the Moto X, it definitely stands out for its saturated colors, gives it that nice wow factor. They both had some really good viewing angles, but it's the IPS display of the Retina 5 that proves to be better when it comes to outdoor visibility. The Moto X actually maximizes the amount of real estate on its facade just because its typical Android capacitive buttons are actually incorporated into the interface, whereas with the iPhone 5, you still have that same old recessed home button. Meanwhile, above the displays, you have their earpieces, their light and proximity sensors, and their front-facing cameras too. Even though the iPhone 5's power button and volume controls are more distinct and larger than the Moto X's set, they both prove to be very tactile and responsive. When it comes to charging data connectivity, they utilize different ports. On the Moto X, it's the more traditional micro USB port versus Apple's proprietary Lightning docking port on the iPhone 5. And finally, we have the respective cameras in the rears. You have a larger 10 megapixel clear pixel camera on the Moto X with an LED flash, and on the iPhone 5 it's the 8 megapixel iSight camera with LED flash, and both have the ability to shoot 1080p video. A common thing we tend to see nowadays, these two handsets have closed designs, meaning that there's no access to their internal batteries, nor is there a way to actually supplement their internal storage. And this leads us to the platform experience. Android versus iOS, something we've compared many times in other comparisons. And ultimately, it's going to come down to just personal preference at this point. With the iOS 6 experience of the iPhone 5, it of course has that very simple and straightforward approach with its presentation and also functionality. It has also the lower learning curve. And we do appreciate the third-party applications on here just because it just seems to be a little bit more polished than what Android still offers. And the ecosystem's of course diverse. In contrast, with the Android 4.2.2 Jelly Bean experience of the Moto X, it has the deeper level of functionality and customization. You could, of course, dress up the home screen with all the widgets and stuff. The way it handles notifications is wonderful too. And even the lock screen, we gain access to a bunch of different widgets to give us a preview without actually going to the separate applications. So they both have their own personal digital assistant services. You have Google Now on the Moto X and Siri on the iPhone 5. And between the two, obviously, Google Now is just a lot more comprehensive. In what it learns, it actually adheres to what we need on a daily basis. In addition to stuff like the weather, it gives us useful things like even scores, also the driving directions to and from home. And on top of that, with the Moto X, it features touchless controls. So all you have to do to activate the service is just pronounce the keywords, "Hey Google Now," and automatically will recognize your voice. Another cool feature that these two share is just quick access to their camera apps when they're both locked. So we're going to quickly show you which one here is faster. So you see, they both roughly take approximately the same amount of time. With the Moto X, you got to twist your hands a couple of times for it to launch, whereas with the iPhone 5, you just got to press the home button and then swipe up to gain access with that. But the benefit with the Moto X, it also works when you're actually in another program. So at any time, just give the handset a couple of twists, and there you go. Despite having a size advantage with its screen size, we don't find the Moto X to be any better than the iPhone 5 when it comes to the messaging experience. You could tell with their keyboard layouts, pretty much the same size too, and on top of that, very good responsiveness, so the two are equally great in this aspect. Another area where they excel in is the web browsing experience. You have 4G LTE connectivity with both, and of course with their respective web browsers, they offer pretty good tight controls, whether it be page rendering on the fly and even navigational controls. You know you're going to get a wonderful experience out of them both. These two are perfect examples as to why you don't need the most cutting-edge hardware to have fantastic performances. They actually perform handsomely with a bunch of different operations. So they're both dual-core processors at their heart. It's a 1.7 GHz Qualcomm Snapdragon S4 Pro processor on the Moto X with 2 GB of RAM versus the 1.3 GHz Apple A6 processor with 1 GB RAM on the iPhone 5. And you could tell they both have the same level of fluidity and performance between them, whether it be simple tasks like opening up applications or even more complex things like gaming. They both exude the same level of responsiveness, which is wonderful. As you probably tell, both handsets shoot for simplicity with their camera apps. Very clean looking for the most part, with very few manual controls and options. With the iPhone 5, you could either set the HDR mode or have panoramic, and that's pretty much it. The Moto X goes a little bit more. You have things like HDR mode, you have a slow motion video mode, panoramic, and of course you could also set for touch focus. You can't go wrong taking photos with either handsets just because the qualities are almost similar, but would give the slight advantage to the iPhone 5 and its 8 megapixel iSight camera versus the 10 megapixel clear pixel camera of the Moto X. Now, in the same scenarios, outdoors, indoors, they both pretty much produce the same results. Very sharp looking photos, though when it comes to details, there's a little bit more found with the iPhone 5 than the Moto X. It just seems to be a little bit softer in tone, but generally speaking, they're both adequate. At the same time, they also excel very highly in low lighting situations. They are able to actually brighten up the shots to draw out more of those details, but again, you just notice softer tones that are evident with the Moto X samples more than anything else. And when it comes to using their LED flashes, they do an excellent job of being very potent, but we tend to see a little bit more warmer colors cast to the Moto X. At the same time, these two handsets are a joy for their 1080p high-definition video recording quality. A lot to like about them, more than usable. The iPhone 5 has just a slight advantage when it comes to fine details. It has a more distinct tone versus the Moto X sample here. But we have other similar qualities like their gradual exposure, their accurate color reproduction, and also their fluid capture rate. So everything's nice and steady. We've seen these two music players before, so we're not too surprised by their presentations. With the iPhone 5, you still have CoverFlow with its music player, a great way to actually browse through your albums. And of course, the Google Play Music application is also wonderful in itself in a variety of different ways, especially if you have access to their all-access service. As far as the audio quality from their respective speakers, we gotta say they're both pretty much on par to one another, very commanding and strong at the lattice volume setting with very minimal distortion. Both are naturally equipped to play high-definition videos with minimal fluff, and that's what we see here, great performance out of the two. But with the Moto X and just Android as a whole, you have more support with various video codecs. With the iPhone 5, you have to do some conversion to get them properly loaded. And just because it's the larger screen, 4.7 inches over the 4-inch Retina display of the iPhone 5, we'll hand it to the Moto X to be the more ideal device to go to for watching videos. Mainly due to the robotic tones that we hear with voices through the Moto X's earpiece and speakerphone quality, we'd probably cite with the iPhone 5 as the device to go to for making phone calls, just because on both ends, voices are clear and distinct there. There might be a little bit of distortion with the speakerphone, but it's not that bad. They're not known for their battery prowess, but we're able to get at least 1 day of normal usage out of full battery charges from the two handsets. Even for power users, you'll be equipped for getting through an 8-hour workshop with little problems. When the dust settles, it's really difficult to proclaim a winner between these two just because they perform very similarly to one another. Also, they're both $200 a 2-year contract, fitting for any flagship smartphone out there. Now with the Moto X, it really sets it apart from other things devices, even the iPhone 5 for the design process. Of course, with Moto Maker, Motorola's online portal, you could customize the design, the color, the pattern, the accent colors. Even you could etch a branding to the back of the device, something you typically don't get with smartphones nowadays. But with the iPhone 5, it continues to have that very premium construction, which people like. They like a phone that has a premium quality to it. Aside from that, it's the platform preference at that point. You have the Moto X's customized Android experience versus iOS on the iPhone 5. Interestingly enough, they kind of go in the same premise of following a very simplified approach. But of course, with Android, you get a little bit deeper functionality, and we see that with things like touchless controls, which puts it ahead of what the iPhone is offering right now. So if you'd like to learn more about both handsets, guys, you could check out our website, PhoneArena.com. This is John V. Thanks for watching.